Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports. Coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the number one network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the number one sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada, we love you. In Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south in the land of the free and the home of the brave on a beautiful January the 2nd, 2019. Ground of the Deportes, Big C. How's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, we're getting a deluge down south here. It's been raining cats and dogs, and I saw a couple of them fall out of the sky. But we're getting through the new year.
Yeah.
2020 is exciting thus far. Plenty of football still going on, and the world of sports is expanding.
Yeah, I hope those cats and dogs are one of your dogs that was trying to come back home, Big C. It's all global war. It's amazing how dogs and cats get there. They also get help from people and calling 911. I want to say it's all fair in the sports universe. Big C Sports, brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he will do his thing, and I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. Also, you can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, and Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. I want to say Big C Sports is brought to you by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, just tell them that Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. A lot of good things going on in sports. Were you serious when you said that cats and dogs were swimming down the street or being washed down the street, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they were more like being washed down the street. You know how dogs like to go out and play in the water and everything,
Yeah.
Charlton. So I don't know if they were washing or running, but they were moving rapidly and stuff. But
Yeah.
the cats were trying to stay dry.
The cats are smarter than dogs when it comes to that, Big C. It's all fair and love and war. I also want to make sure on this beautiful 2020, it's such a great year. I want to make sure that we can pick people up when someone needs to help up. The National Suicide Hotline, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Charlton, it's important to me, and it should be important to every American and every person around. When we think about the horrific disease that's called suicide, Charlton, and it's in alarming numbers these days in America and around the world, and we have to find a way as a culture to stem this horrific disease from occurring. It's occurring too often in our military veterans, Charlton. Some 20 a day are succumbing to this disease, and there should be more efforts by our country
Yeah.
to go out and stop this. And what's even more troubling, Charlton, is the youth of America who are also doing this and taking their lives from this horrific disease. There's a support group, the 1-800 Suicide Prevention Hotline number that we give out, Charlton, is
Yeah.
there full of people, hopefully to help, to give you an answer to a way out, to, change the alternative that you've been pursuing in this disease, Charlton. We think about the support base in our country of family, friends, and military personnel.
Yeah.
And for some reason, it's just not doing enough. As we look out as a culture and we get distracted by all the various things that go along, whether it's sports, whether it's entertainment, whether it's the holidays that come around, Charlton, we forget to check on those people that are desperately in need of somebody to lean on, to have
Yeah.
communications with. But this suicide prevention hotline number is there for those people to call. But one of the more unfortunate acts in America, Charlton, is that everyone doesn't have access to a phone, either a landline or a cell phone. So it becomes very difficult for people to reach out to. And
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things that is everybody, including us, when we give out phone numbers for people to call, is that everybody does not have that electronic access.
Yeah.
So we have to find a way to get more cellular devices and landlines in people's hands so that they can make the call to the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number.
That's a very good start, Big C. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or texting 838-255. That's 838-255. I used to recall when I was a young boy growing up, always at 11 o'clock. And now that I have my own children, it makes more sense to me. It would say, it's 11 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? And I hope that we can have more PSAs that give people help similar to that message that I still recall from many, many moons ago. And I hope that we're a part of that solution. So much happening in the world of sports. Going back to yesterday, we had the games, the bowl games. There's so many of them. I love this time of year. The granddaddy of them all really showed up. The Rose Bowl, the maintenance crew that does that turf, you can't tell that it's not AstroTurf unless you get up close on it. They do a really good job of painting that field and maintaining that field as the granddaddy of them all. But I want to say to the Pac-12, what a great showing to showcase your championship team in front of the universe, and especially at the Rose Bowl. I think it's a great recruiting tool going forward like it was in the past. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, a lot of these, significant bowl games, such as the New Year Day bowl games that are out there, and the Rose Bowl has always been one of those bowls that have been looked upon from throughout the country, regardless of the conference that you play in.
Yeah.
And it's always been a rival game between the Big Ten and the Pac-8, Pac-10, now Pac-12.
Yeah.
So as we look at this game and what it means to those conferences, when you're putting basically the Northeast versus the West Coast, and to have an outcome like you did that comes down to the last minute of the game, a great game played in all aspects. That special teams put touchdowns on the board for both teams, Charlton, and offenses and defenses played stalwart opponents.
Yeah, we always hear about Justin Herbert and how well he would do, and then Wisconsin's, running game and their defense. And then, Big C, we cannot avoid it. There was a play, kind of questionable, even though I do agree with the call, kind of, when Wisconsin was called for a offensive pass interference. I mean, I don't know. I just don't know anymore, but I do know that prop bets are paying off big time down in Vegas, Big C. Officials got to make money, too. They're saying they need more money like everybody else. But outside of that, Wisconsin, because of turnovers, Oregon was able to win that game. And I'll say the defense forced some turnovers, too. And then Herbert didn't have his greatest game, but he did have a game running the ball. He scored 3 touchdowns on the ground. Wisconsin, when you think about what they did offensively, they were right there to win the game, but their punter just kind of dropped the ball, almost like he didn't try to kick the ball. I'm not being cynical. Have you ever seen a punter just miss the kick? Big C, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, Charlton. It has occurred before where punters have whiffed or shanked the ball, and it's one of the things of football. You just don't know at whatever time that somebody's going to make a mistake and how significant it will be an outcome of a game.
Yeah, so the Rose Bowl, obviously, the granddaddy of them all. I've been watching it for so many years, being out here on the West Coast. I can say, without a doubt, the Rose Bowl will be the closest game in this New Year's Bowl games, Big C, 28-27. Oregon Ducks over the Wisconsin Badgers, and what a great game it was. The crowd was full. I love the pageantry. I love the way they show the majestic scenery around the San Gabriel Mountains. You have snow-capped mountains, but the temperature's only 50-something degrees. But you look about Justin Herbert, quarterback for Oregon. He'll be a first-round pick by somebody. But he had a great victory in the Rose Bowl to close out his final season. When I also look at what happened in the Alabama and Michigan game, there was an 85-yard touchdown on Alabama's first play. Mark Jones passing to Jerry Jeudy, 35-16 in that win versus Michigan. But did you notice, before we touch a little bit on the Sugar Bowl, it was Coach Saban, and I know he'd taken some flack from Harbaugh, Big C, how Harbaugh was just criticizing the SEC. They could have taken a knee to run out the last minute and a half down by the goal line. Nick Saban ran it in anyway, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you look at Alabama, this has been a proud program over the last 9 years.
Yeah.
Since Nick Saban has been around, and those two coaches have taken some jabs at each other throughout the media, or at least the media said that they have. But, when you look at Alabama, and Alabama, is proving a point as far as recruiting and staying strong on the college football slate.
Yeah.
If you look at what Alabama did in that game, Charlton, is that they made history. They're the only college football program over the last 9 consecutive years to have at least 11 victories. And so when you think about what Nick Saban goes out and tries to prove at the end of each year, and that's to get his team into double digits. They were 10-2 on the regular season. They win their bowl game, takes them to 11-2 on the season. That's what Nick Saban does, is win.
Yep, and he doesn't apologize. Like if somebody said, you guys are giving up too many points. It was Gary Fowles, but he couldn't believe that. I think Miami had ran the score on Notre Dame. And they were calling it was anathema for college football. They wanted people fired, Big C. And Jimmy Johnson said, if you don't want us to score, stop us. I think that's one of the greatest statements about how coaches have conversations back and forth. 204 yards, 2 touchdowns receiving for Minnesota's Tyler Johnson in a 31-24 win in the Outback Bowl over Auburn. That's a great performance that not too many people talk about. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is not the first time this year that he's had a performance like that. He did that earlier in the year against Penn State in that memorable win for Minnesota to help them get to a 10-win regular season, and they had their best season ever since 2004 when they amassed 11 victories on this season.
Yeah, they did their thing there. I really appreciate seeing so many great athletes playing. And also, as we go down to the Sugar Bowl, that was played in New Orleans. They announced a crowd of 50,000. I believe the stadium holds about 78,000, but 50,000 on hand. And it goes back to something that you say, that maybe there's too many games when Georgia and Baylor are not that far from New Orleans. In fact, a lot of the SEC teams are right down in the neighborhood. But now they experience what the Pac-12 has been experiencing too, where people just did not turn out en masse for the game. Again, the Rose Bowl had 80-something thousand, 88,000. The Sugar Bowl had about 50,000. So the West Coast finally got the upper hand over the good old boys down south. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I remember back in the heyday when the Rose Bowl used to get 106,000 people in that great stadium. So when you think about the numbers of that stadium, it's down some 20,000
well, they took out 20,000
over time.
Seats. Yeah, they took out 20,000
But as you look at these games and your third-ranked team in your conference, those are the things that people are looking at, and it's tough to have bowl games that are not about New Year's Day like they used to be. And when these games will never get you to a national championship, that has a lot to do with the attendance of the game, and that's one of the reasons that I fight against the expansion of the bowl playoff series, Charlton, because I don't care how you add games in whatever light, so many of these games eventually become insignificant.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a battle of attrition where those players, no matter how big, strong, and fast they are. In fact, there's the Baylor quarterback got knocked out of the game, concussed last night. That happened to him.
Well, Charlie Brewer had gotten knocked out in the Big 12 championship game, Charlton. But I think another thing that hurt in this game is that Georgia had 15 players that did not play in this game. 15 players from the regular season.
Yeah.
So from a fan base perspective, they're sitting there saying, okay, we're going to watch the backups play in a game. The players who got them to this game felt that it's no longer important enough to play in this game, and 4 of them didn't even show because they were prepping for the NFL draft.
Yeah.
Both of their offensive tackles didn't even show up last night.
Yeah, and as we talk about, that happens when people won't show up, but they'll still play the games, and those checks will still get cashed, and I don't think the money's going to get lighter. It's just a matter of how people watch games. I want to get into something a little bit different today. We're talking about the Big C's all-decade, the NFL all-decade teams, 2010 through 2019. But I also want to pay respect to Sam Weiss. The NFL community lost one of his greatest coaches, late Sam Weiss. He was only 77 years old, which is very young in today's era, Big C. I remember Sam Weiss had those great teams in Cincinnati when they would actually play in Super Bowls against the 49ers back in the day. And to see a young, I guess 77 is young compared to how long people live today, but just give me your thoughts on the great Sam Weiss. He was part of the Ickey Shuffle with Ickey Woods back in the day, and those bingo teams that were always challenging for AFC Conference Championships. Your thoughts?
Well, ironically, when you think about Sam Weiss, he and David Stearns were the same age, and they passed away a day apart.
Wow.
This was a coach who cut his teeth in the NFL as a member of the Bill Walsh coaching tree with the San Francisco 49ers and moved on to get the head coaching job with the Cincinnati Bengals. He led that organization to 2 Super Bowls, and ironically, they came up short twice against the San Francisco 49ers, once in Detroit and once in Miami. But Sam Weiss was a very significant individual in the NFL as it grew, as far as the passing attack.
Yeah.
He took the West Coast office to the Midwest, Charlton, and became very successful with it.
Why? And it's amazing how we don't take anything for granted. Every day is a blessing, Big C. The Bengals organization is nowhere near, not even the shadow. The only thing that remains with you 24 hours a day is your shadow. That's the only thing that never leaves you. What has happened to that organization where they've fallen on such hard times, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if the organization has fallen on hard times. They had a bad year. When you think about the success that Marvin Lewis had with that organization, right. Charlton, you know, you can't say that organization was down. They decided to make a coaching change.
Yeah.
And when they made the coaching change, they did not get what they bargained for. They did not expect the failure that they were going to have. They will turn things around in the next couple of years. I don't know if Zach Taylor's the right guy, but they got to start with a quarterback in the NFL draft.
They got to start with a quarterback. So for the Sam Weiss family and all the people that were able to get coached by him, I've only heard good things about the late Sam Weiss. And speaking of coaches, there's a couple of more. I know with the Dallas Cowboys, I think Jerry Jones had another meeting with Coach Garrett. It looks like he's trying to keep him on. I mean, if you want to get rid of somebody, you let them go fast so they can get on their feet again, Big C. And in fact, the fact that Coach Ron Rivera got a job because they were not waiting for all the other shoes to drop. The Washington Redskins, Coach Snyder, the owner Snyder, got him in there, which is the rival for the Cowboys in the Redskins. Jerry Jones, again, it's looking like he's going to keep Garrett, Big C, because if you don't keep him, you're just hurting your team's chances to go out and find somebody now. They could have had Rivera, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know if it's a point about having Rivera. I think everybody in the media, even us, are looking at this from the wrong way. The man is still under contract.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to fire people. You just don't have to renew the contract.
Yeah.
He still has about 10 days left on his contract with the Dallas Cowboys. So it's not about firing Jason Garrett, which everybody wants to be the first to say they fired him and hired who. Who do you go out and hire?
Right.
I mean, when you look at the favorable positions in the NFL as far as coaches go, who's that great? I mean, the guys that everybody's interviewing is unemployed. So you're going out there saying, I'm going to take the unemployed guy, and he's going to be better than the guy that's there.
Yeah.
One of the things about the Dallas Cowboys is that they have an overrated roster. People look at them and say, Dallas Cowboys, America's team. That's fine. They're like the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah.
They have a lot of talent, but it's an overrated roster. Who is truly a total superstar on the Dallas Cowboys that you could say you could pencil him into any team in the NFL, he's going to make that team better?
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott is not the NFL's leading rusher.
No.
Dak Prescott is not the NFL's leading passer. Amari Cooper is not the NFL's leading receiver. They don't have anybody. Lawrence on defense is not the leading sacker.
No.
Smith on defense is not the leading tackler. They have no cornerbacks that's in the top in the NFL in interceptions. So this is a team that's a paper team like the Cleveland Browns. So people who say that the Dallas Cowboys are great are, drinking too much moonshine.
Or maybe Gatorade that has a slight different taste to it, Big C. Give me your thoughts. We didn't need the Rooney Rule, as far as I know, to have Rivera gets the opportunity to get in with Washington. He has Super Bowl experience. He has championship game experience. But he's not taking Cam Newton with him. However, he does have Hoskins, a guy that he can develop a lot like Cam Newton. I think that's a good hire if Snyder lets him coach, though, Big C. Your thoughts?
And you have the same situation in Washington as you had in Dallas. When you look at the coaches that have been there in Washington, is Ron Rivera better than the coaches that they've had? Especially when you think about Shanahan.
Yeah.
Shanahan had gone to 2 Super Bowls with Denver and won.
That's right.
And you can't say that same thing about Rivera.
Right.
But the problem with all the coaches that he's had in there, Charlton, is that he likes to interfere.
Yeah.
He becomes friends with the players, which makes it very tough for a coach or a GM to dismiss a player, because all he's going to do is go whine to Snyder and say, I think these guys are after me. And so the ultimate boss is going to talk to the lower boss and say, you're not going to make that move. So now all of a sudden the coach doesn't have the power within an organization. Same as when Al Davis got old with the Raiders.
Yeah.
A lot of interference, and you're getting that same interference in Washington that you've had in Dallas.
That's a very good point about the late Al Davis. They called him the Maverick for a reason, Big C. So we hope everyone lands on their feet. There's something about this game that everybody loves. But no matter who lands on their feet, I want to get into Big C's NFL All-Decade team from 2010 through 2019. And we know some of those guys are still playing. It's just an opinion. Everybody has their own opinion. Quarterback, Tom Brady. Brady captured 2 regular season MVP awards, 2 Super Bowl MVP honors, 2 first-team All-Pro selections. He threw the 4th most yards and the 2nd most touchdowns and won most games by a wide margin. And he was a 6th-round draft pick out of Michigan by Sarah High School of San Mateo. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not only that, Charlton, you got to look at a couple little Super Bowl trinkets that he has hanging on his fingers, a few more than any other quarterback in NFL history. I mean, when you look at Tom Brady being the best quarterback of the decade, it's not just about numbers, but his numbers speak for themselves, but it's what he's done as a teammate and in an organization that has made him the best quarterback in the last decade in the NFL.
And imagine he got his job because a player got hurt. I think it was Bledsoe that got hurt, knocked to the sidelines, and Brady got on and never gave that job back, Big C. But when you're a quarterback like Brady and you need someone to hand the ball off to so the defense doesn't just zero in on your passing, running back Adrian Peterson out of Oklahoma, the past decade alone, think about this. Peterson's total 11,268 yards from scrimmage, 76 touchdowns the past 2 years in Washington, D.C. Peterson's average, think about this guy, averages 6.5 touchdowns per season. He's the best running back of his generation. He also had a knee that was torn up a couple of years ago. He did his thing for the Minnesota Vikings, and then he's still playing, even after he had his knee reconstructed. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not only after he had that knee reconstructed, Charlton, he came back the following year and just missed the all-time single-season rushing record held by Eric Dickerson by a couple of yards, amassing over 2,100 yards rushing on that season. But when you think about the perseverance and the endurance of an Adrian Peterson throughout his NFL career, we all know the dominant back that he was when he was with the Minnesota Vikings, but now the last two seasons with the Washington Redskins averaging over 1,000 yards a season, Charlton, this is a guy that just does not know how to give up.
Yeah, I really admired how he ran the ball when he was at Oklahoma back in the day. Did the same thing in the NFL. Just an amazing athlete. And for all the guys who get injured, sometimes you do come back better and stronger. Really appreciate that he's still bringing it.
Well, think about this, Charlton. When you think about two of the most longevous running backs in the NFL right now, Adrian Peterson and Frank Gore.
Yeah.
Both of these gentlemen have suffered horrific knee injuries. Frank Gore told both of his ACL.
Yeah.
Adrian Peterson had to have a complete knee reconstruction with a cadaver knee ligaments going into his knee.
Yeah.
And both of them are still churning. Frank Gore is the number 3 all-time rusher in NFL history, and Adrian Peterson, his nickname stands for itself, all day.
All day, every day, Big C. It's just amazing to see players who are injured now, they still come back. And every good running back, you talked about the great Frank Gore and also Adrian Peterson, Big C, Frank Gore out of the University of Miami. But fullback Kyle Husak is a rare fullback who's actually fun to watch over the past 6 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens and the San Francisco 49ers, averaging 30 catches, 275 yards receiving per season. And think about this, named to 4 straight Pro Bowls, Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Juszczyk as a fullback, one of those forgotten entities in the NFL, this is a guy that comes out of the Ivy League. So it's not that he's just tough, but he's intelligent. Probably the most intelligent running back in all of the NFL, Charlton. But he's been an integral part in 2 team success, and mainly with the 49ers these days.
And not getting any other glory, always blocking. If he gets a pass, it's just for a couple of yards, but he's doing his thing. Really appreciate seeing how fullbacks are also getting into the mix. Big C, we've talked about great quarterbacks and Brady, talked about running backs like Peterson, of course, Husak as a fullback. When you got to throw the football, this guy, it may be anathema to say, but I think he's better than Jerry Rice. His career's not over yet. Wide receiver Julio Jones, even if he never gets a ring, on a Hall of Fame trajectory this guy is, he's not slowing down. His 707 catches, 12,125 yards, 57 touchdowns, clearly demonstrates how dominant he is, and he's on a team that oftentimes doesn't run the ball enough to get him open to get even more yards. They pass a lot, and I just think he's amazing, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, not pass a lot, Charlton. They don't pass enough to Julio Jones. As dominant as Julio Jones is as a wide receiver in the NFL, you think about a man of a stature of 6'4", weighs about 223 pounds, playing wide out, Charlton. He's an unstoppable object. And, this is a guy that a couple of years ago when Atlanta was in the Super Bowl, if Matt Ryan had thrown in the ball a couple more times, maybe they would have hoisted that trophy and he would have gotten that ring. He had one of the greatest catches in that Super Bowl on a sideline catch, Charlton, that only Julio Jones could have made. But when you think about being a perennial all-pro, consistent 1,000-yard and 100 catch receiver.
Yeah.
Julio Jones did it again this year with 99 receptions and over 1,400 yards.
And I think in that Super Bowl, I want to say he had less than 5 catches. I may be wrong, but I think he had fewer than 5 catches. Doesn't make any sense. Big C, this is a guy coming up, not as big, but just as fast, and maybe even more athletic. But I still like Julio. Wide receiver Antonio Brown, irrespective of what he does off the field, at his best from 2011 to 2018, during those seasons, he racked up the most receptions by 123 catches, the most receiving yards by 309 yards, and the most touchdown catches by 7 touchdowns. He was the best receiver in football, and it wasn't even that close. And he had a guy named Big Ben who knew that he was on his team. That's why he threw so many times to him. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, not only that, when you think about Antonio Brown, as you talked about Tom Brady, he was a 6th-round draft pick, Charlton, out of Central Michigan. This was a guy who had to work his way into stardom in the NFL. No one gave him a chance.
Yeah.
But because everybody doubted him as a player, he went out to prove everybody wrong. Statistically, he was the most dominant wide receiver in the NFL for those years that you talked about from 11 to 18. Other than his off-the-field antics, Charlton, no one could doubt the greatness of Antonio Brown.
No, he's just been a stud. If he could just stay focused off the field as he does on the field, he still has a bright future once things settle down with the NFL. Big C in their investigation. You need a slot receiver, a guy that can go over the middle and not be afraid to catch a pass. I think about the great Larry Fitzgerald, still doing his thing. The past decade alone, Fitzgerald's averaged 85.5 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 6 touchdowns. No receiver caught more passes than him at that span, and he hasn't always played on a winning team doing his thing. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, he's always been on a team from behind, Charlton. He's always been the underdog. And when Larry Fitzgerald came into the NFL, he wasn't the most fleetest of receivers, Charlton, but he had as good a set of hands as any receiver that has played in the NFL, and he has consistently proven that. You think about the number of quarterbacks that he's had to play with since he's been in the league, a bunch of no-names along with Kurt Warner, the kid from USC that played with Cincinnati, lose me at the moment right now, Carson Palmer. And now with he had your friend out of UCLA who stayed there for a cup of coffee, and now he has Kyler Murray. So this man has gone through a wealth of receivers. He's been consistent with all of them, Charlton, as a receiver with all the quarterbacks that have thrown him the football. He's the one constant that the Arizona Cardinals have been able to lean on.
Yeah, he's amazing, Big C. Tight end, you think about tight ends. I still like Kellen Winslow. I know everybody has their own, but I remember they had to drag Kellen Winslow off the field after a playoff game when he played for the Chargers, and then they were playing down in Florida with all that heat and humidity, as you guys call it. But the nouveau riche guy, Rob Gronkowski, out of the University of Arizona, there's never been a tight end as dominant as Gronk in his 9-year career. He racked up 7,863 yards and 80 touchdowns, and of course, catching for the great Tom Brady. You can't drop too many because he won't give you a second or third chance. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, Gronk has been a great tight end in his time in the NFL. He's retired, and everybody said he retired too soon. No, he didn't. He retired when it was time for him to leave the game. But the one tight end that Rob Gronkowski reminds me of more than any tight end that's ever played is Mike Ditka. People don't remember Mike Ditka, but he was the first nouveau tight end in NFL history. He was the first tight end to have over 1,000 yards receiving. When anybody wants to go back and compare tight ends and the records, Mike Ditka held them all before Kellen Winslow and Rob Gronkowski. But Gronkowski was a beast during his days with the New England Patriots. He was that mismatch that nobody wanted to see from a defensive perspective. He helped make Tom Brady in that offense in New England very dominant, and helped them win 3 Super Bowls, Charlton.
And not only that, the guy, he knew he was going to get banged up. He looked like a guy that was wearing an Army gear when he was playing, when he finished his playing days, smart enough to kind of cover up his whole body. We're going to come up with what's called the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the big nasties. They call them the hogs and all the guys, the big uglies and whatever they call them. I know they hold a lot. We'll touch on that when we come back in the second half. All All right, we are back from what's called the Big C Timeout, also known as the Big C Pause, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on the apps that I love, called Spreaker.com, also Xfinity Comcast Television. You can find us on the other apps too. We keep getting so many apps, Big C, but Google Podcasts, and then also Alexa, just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Big C, I want to also, I know everybody says how great running backs are. We talked about running backs. How great quarterbacks are. We talked about how great quarterbacks are. Tight ends, fullbacks, they're all good. But nobody does anything without a good offensive line. Left tackle, Joe Thomas set an NFL record by playing 10,360 snaps. And over his 11-year career, the ultimate Iron Man, he was first team All-Pro 6 times, with 5 of them coming in a decade. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you just saw Wisconsin play in the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
Joe Thomas was a product of the University of Wisconsin, and he never took a playoff during his NFL career prior to having an injury, Charlton.
Wow.
You talk about those consistent snaps that he took as an offensive lineman, the futility that he had to deal with the Cleveland Browns. But when the Browns showed up, you knew that one thing was going to happen game in and game out. That defensive end that was going against Joe Thomas was going to have a long and tough day.
They're going to have a long and tough day. They are nasty, but they're necessary. It's a necessary evil, Big C. Left guard Mike Upati for the past 10 seasons. Upati has played one of the most consistent sides of the ball, left guard, in the game. 4 trips to the Pro Bowl and first-team All-Pro honors. He's been with the Seattle Seahawks of late, but also with the 49ers. A big guy that's just very consistent, even though I'm told that he grabs a lot. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, he spent his entire pro career out on the West Coast, basically out of University of Idaho, Charleston, a small college, up there in the potato state.
Yeah.
But he's come back and he laid a lot of spuds on defensive tackles in the NFL. You remember mentioned as a member of the 49ers, the Arizona Cardinals, and now of the Seattle Seahawks. One of the most massive offensive guards in the game.
Yeah, he has a lot of great pancake blocks through his career, Big C. I'm sure he'll have even more. Center, people don't understand that centers are also the quarterback for the offensive lineman. You need guys that can identify what play defenses are playing. And when you watch the playoffs coming up, you'll watch the center pointing his hands and telling his other linemen who to block and who's blitzing. Center, Mike Pouncey. Pouncey's going to 8 Pro Bowls and has been first-team All-Pro twice. He also came to the defense of his quarterback when they had us in Hannigan back in the Midwest. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, it's great to have a twin brother that does the same thing that you do when you grow up, Charlton. And Marquise Pouncey has just that. As the center of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Charlton, he's a former #1 draft pick out of the University of Florida. He's been a perennial All-Pro and the leader of one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You think about the running backs that they've had. They've had multiple 1,000-yard rushes with Le'Veon Bell and now the young man Connor out of the University of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
But you think about the killer bees that he blocked for, Charlton, when he had Bell, Big Ben, and Brown.
Yeah.
Perennial All-Pros, Charlton, behind the butt of this man.
That's very well said, Big C. Right guard, Marcelo Yonder. Yonder, a 2-time first-team All-Pro selection, and he played this year. He's 35 years old. People talk about players being washed up when they're 30. He's 35, and he's still holding on to every lineman he can. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you think about Yonder, Charlton, and playing the position of guard in the NFL, having to be very nasty for a long time, over a decade of taking poundings against multiple defensive linemen, Charlton. But as you look at Yonder this year, Charlton, he's blocked for the leading rushing team in the NFL with a 1,000-yard running back and a 1,000-yard quarterback, and slated to be the best offense in the league at this moment.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I know you don't like offensive linemen because you still got some fingernails. Why do defensive linemen put grease, baby oil, and all kind of stuff on their arms? Big C?
Well, you know, if you're going to be that close and intimate with somebody, Charlton, you want to make sure that you're nice and soft for them. And that's the reason why.
That's the reason why. We know that's not true, Big C, but it's all fair. 11 War, right tackle. Right, Mitchell Schwartz, since entering the league in 2012, you know, he's never missed a game. He's been named first-team All-Pro once. Big C, your thoughts?
And you think about it, this is another offensive lineman who has a brother who plays in the NFL also, Charlton. But when you think about Schwartz, he's protecting one of the most valuable properties in the NFL. He is the left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, and that guy, Mr. Mahomes, is very thankful for him every game.
Yeah, I'm sure he's very thankful for him. And I still know that even you don't believe you want to get close to linemen. They wear the baby oil and the grease. Think about this. Back in the day, the Raiders made Stickum very famous. It was Cliff Branch and all them good old boys, Biletnikoff. But then the defensive guys, they wear oil, so you can't grab them. They have not outlawed the oil, but they outlawed the Stickum. Because that doesn't make any sense. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, it was giving an unfair advantage. But now when you look at offensive players and they have these gloves that are very tacky, just like Stickum, you see all these spectacular one-hand catches. Think about how football would be if they banned the gloves that the receivers and defensive backs wore.
Yeah, it's better than Stickum. So let's go to the side of the line where you like to sit down at the dinner table, because a lot of offensive linemen and defensive linemen, they don't like to eat together because they're always holding each other. Big C, edge rusher, Von Miller.
You got to hold hands when you're saying prayer. And so as you think about offensive defensive linemen, think about them being at the dinner table and you're getting ready to say prayer before you eat.
Yeah, I understand, Big C. And all the offensive linemen would hold all the ribs. I understand that's all fair and love and war. Speaking of holding, a lot of offensive linemen tried to hold this guy, Von Miller. This decade alone, the great Von Miller has generated 106 quarterback sacks. Nobody even comes close to having more. 106 for one player. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you know, that's what happens when you chase chickens for a living. And Von Miller raises his own chickens on his ranch. You know, this was a first-round product out of Texas A&M who lived up to all the hype of coming out of college. Not only does he have 106 sacks in his NFL career, Charlton, he probably has that many pair of eyeglasses in his closet also.
Yeah. And when you go to training camp and you got to catch a rooster, you know that's a bad news, Big C. Athletes are a little bit bigger and easier to catch than a rooster. Edge rusher, Khalil Mack, in his 6 seasons. The great Mack has registered 61 and a half sacks, racked up 3 first-team All-Pro selections, 5 Pro Bowl nods, and 1 Defensive Player of the Year. He was even so good that Gruden traded him. Big C.
Well, you know, as everybody looks at the bowl games that are going on TV now, Charlton, and talking about the Power 5 conferences, if it was all about the players out of the Power 5 conference, Khalil Mack would have never made it to the NFL. Coming out of tiny Buffalo, Khalil Mack was a first-round draft pick of the Raiders, 2nd pick overall behind Jadeveon Clowney, Charlton, and he has delivered every day that he's been in the NFL, from Rookie of the Year to All-Pro, Charlton, to Defensive Player of the Year. Khalil Mack has been a force on the defensive lines in Oakland and in Chicago.
When I think about guys like the Minister of Defense, they call that the great Reggie White, the late great Reggie White, Big C. I go to interior defensive lineman Aaron Donald, a guy that's also been held a lot by some offensive linemen. It's borderline insane. Think about a guy who operates exclusively in the middle of the trenches, has managed to average 12 sacks per season, oftentimes being double-teamed, Big C, including an epic 20.5 sacks in the season of 2018. It's also won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. How do you win Defensive Player of the Year award when you're being double-teamed, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, that's a testament to himself, being a double team. He has an alumni on this same team. We talked about Larry Fitzgerald earlier, and now we're talking about Aaron Donald. Both of them products of the University of Pittsburgh. But Aaron Donald has been something that we have not seen in the NFL for a long time. You talked about the late Minister of Defense earlier, Reggie White. But what Aaron Donald brings to this team, Charlton, as far as tenacity and quickness, he's not a big type player as you would think of a defensive tackle. He just blows you away with athleticism, and he's been unstoppable the past 2 years in the NFL.
He really had, and he plays on grass, which oftentimes gives way. A lot of guys on synthetic turf, they keep their footing, Big C. So I really I don't know if they're going to put synthetic turf or not in the new Ram Stadium. That'll be interesting. I hope they do, but we'll see what happens. Interior lineman, who's actually going to be back for the playoffs this weekend. So far, that's what we're hearing. J.J. Watt. Watt has recorded 96 sacks in the decade, tied for second most, even though he's missed 32 games over the past 4 seasons. Watt had 2 times 20.5 sack seasons and was named first-team All-Pro 5 times, captured 3 Defensive Player of the Year awards, also was a great ambassador to helping the flood victims down in Texas. Big C, your thoughts?
While being healthy during the decade, Charlton, there's never been a more dominant defensive lineman than J.J. Watt. You just spoke about the accolades that he has. The 96 sack total, only second to Von Miller. But as you mentioned, he's missed 32 games, so he's had a greater sack ratio than anybody that we've named on this list. And he's often met with double teams throughout his career. And another one of those alumni, Charlton, that we talked about, like Joe Thomas, from the University of Wisconsin.
Yeah, University. They could have used him in the Rose Bowl, Big C, but it's all fair. And Levin Ward, nose tackle. Vince, I'll eat anything on the plate. Wofolk, I'm sure a lot of guys didn't eat dinner around him, Big C, because he was always eating with 2 forks. He did earn 1 first-team All-Pro selection, 3 trips to the Pro Bowl in the decade. He racked up 40 sacks, which ranks second all-time among defensive tackles. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Vince, he retired at the end of last season, Charlton, but he's one of those boys from the University of Miami. You could tell that Vince didn't work out that much with the girth that he had, but Vince was an unbelievable run stopper in the middle of the defense in New England, picking up a couple Super Bowl wins and coming down, helping that defense in Texas become stalwarts.
Yeah, I just remember how just amazing. You're never the greatest guy in shape, but if you can play, you can play. It doesn't matter what size you are. Linebacker Bobby Wagner. No matter how you are as a defensive guy or a quarterback, you got to know where Bobby Wagner is on the field. He racked up more combined tackles than Wagner. Nobody did that to him, Big C. During the past 10 seasons, missing only 9 games in 8 seasons, he's been named first-team All-Pro 4 times, or you should say half of his career, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Bobby Wagner has been the consistent in Seattle. Everyone remembers the Legion of Boom. He was the leader of that defense, Charlton. But when you have a defensive linebacker that you can count on, play in and play out, this is the guy who was the quarterback on defense, who was getting everybody in the right position. And when you look at Bobby Wagner out of Utah State, wasn't really thought of as a great linebacker coming out of college, but he proved everybody wrong when he arrived in Seattle.
Yeah, and that Legion of Boom is amazing. They're still doing their thing up north, Big C. Linebacker Luke Kuechly, he's only second to Wagner in combined tackles over the course of the decade. He's been named first-team All-Pro 5 times, and he won Defensive Player of the Year once. And he was always overshadowed by the great Cam Newton on the other side of the ball. But defensively, he was their defensive leader, Big C. Your thoughts?
Without Luke Kuechly, you knew that the Carolina Panthers really did not have a defense. He was their leader on and off the field, Charlton. And when he wasn't in the lineup, there was a huge difference and void in their defense. This is a graduate of Boston College, Charlton. He's in the Hall of Fame in Boston College. He will eventually end up in the Hall of Fame in the NFL.
Yeah, he definitely will. One of the players I interviewed earlier last year, the linebacker Patrick Willis. Willis surprisingly retired after the 2014 season, meaning he only played 5 out of 10 years of the decade. His 5th and final season in only 6 games, but from 2010 to 2013, Willis racked up 345 solo tackles, 11.5 sacks, 10 forced fumbles, 3 interceptions, and he was a guy that could just chase down a running back. Big C, your thoughts?
You know, Patrick Willis out of the University of Mississippi, Charlton, his career was cut short and besieged by injuries. But when he was on the field for the San Francisco 49ers, Charlton, he was one of the top dominant linebackers in the NFL. You had to make an accountability of him with your offense. You needed to know where Patrick Willis was every play, Charlton. He had a teammate, Navarro Bowman. When you look at the two, Charlton, it was hard to make a choice who would get the nod.
Yeah, I mean, I remember their sideline to sideline. Just love the way he played the game. Big C, linebackers are great, but oftentimes when they blitz, you got to have some good cornerbacks so you don't get beat deep. I think the 49ers figured that out. Cornerback, Richard Sherman. Sherman, it goes beyond the interceptions. He almost always shuts down opposing receivers. He's not the biggest, he's not the fastest guy, but he has a knack for where the ball is going to be. He had the misfortune of having some routes on the field that caused him to have a torn Achilles. I mean, everybody knows you get injured in football, but he came back from it. However, he still leads in interceptions in the past decade with 35, and this is a guy that tore his ACL, and think about this, when he played for Legion of Boom, Seattle went to the Super Bowl. The 49ers, they're elected, or they're the number one seed right now in the NFC. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they are, but when you think about Richard Sherman, the quarterback position involves a lot of intelligence. This is a man who's a graduate of the University of Stanford.
Yep.
So you knew when he was in college he was no dummy. He was a fifth-round draft pick by the Seattle Seahawks. He developed into one of the top corners of the decade in the NFL, and many times he's stuck on the team's top receiver, and he's going to have to be that shutdown corner, but he still has 35 interceptions on the decade, which leads the NFL.
You know, I want to just expound on that, too, because if you mentioned at the Pac-12 when he played for Stanford under Coach Jim Harbaugh, they had beaten USC, knocked them from being number one in the country, and not too many moons ago, but he was also a part of the reason they beat USC. And then one of the reasons that the Seattle Seahawks, the Legion of Boom, went to the Super Bowl, and they went to Super Bowls back-to-back. They blew out Denver and lost an inexplicable game to the New England Patriots. But it's just amazing. We talked about Adrian Peterson earlier. Also, you talked about Frank Gore. These guys have had injuries. 20, 30 years ago, it would be career-ending injuries. Same thing with Sermon, but he's come back, and he's still just as good. Not as fast, but more savvy. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, speed is always not the determining factor in the secondary, Charlton. It's about knowing where to be on the field, understanding the routes of your opponent, receivers, and knowing what the quarterback's ability are in getting the ball to a particular spot on the field.
Yeah, he's like another coach on the field. Also, sticking with the defense, this always, I don't know why they say guys got to have a short memory, Big C, but I understand if you're a quarterback, you got to have a short memory. But Patrick Peterson's notched 25 interceptions and 3 first-team All-Pro knives over the past 9 seasons. It's just that when you give up a play, people go, oh, I can't believe he got beat. But there's a lot of times you don't get beat, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, you don't get beat. Patrick Peterson is one of those guys who's going to be a cheerleader in a couple of weeks when the Louisiana Tigers, LSU, goes down and plays for the national championship. He's a product of LSU, former number 1 draft pick with the Cardinals, where he spent his entire career out there in the desert, Charlton. And he's always been a stalwart at corner. He's very physical. He's big. He's long. Just like Richard Sherman, when you put these guys on a receiver, you can't get a physical mismatch because they can man up with anybody.
Who does he remind you of going back? I know we're doing the last decade, but just go back over the years as nobody but you can do, Big C. Who does he remind you of? Some of the old-timers back in the day when they fought, I guess, back in the 60s and 70s. Does he remind you of anybody that you said, I don't want to throw against this guy, Big C? Your thoughts?
You know, he reminds me of a hybrid between a Mel Blount of the Pittsburgh Steelers and a Lem Barney who used to play with the Detroit Lions. He's a combination of both of those players, size, speed, and quickness, Charlton, and can cover any receiver over the field.
Yeah, I mean, just guys that can pick it up and lay it down. I really appreciate athletes that can cover one-on-one, and they're not a liability to their team whatsoever, Big C. I want to get on to another player because you got to have good corners on both sides of the field. And when you have that, you're going to win some games. I think about slot corner Chris Harris. Harris has 20 career interceptions. That's first-team All-Pro appearances, 4 Pro Bowl selections. Oftentimes, these guys are on an island, and they got to have short memories unless they're dealing with, how do I cover a guy again, Big C? These guys, they're always on an island, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Cliff Harris is one of those guys who flies under the radar because he had some great help up in front of him, Von Miller, who has led the NFL in sacks during that decade, Charlton. It also helps you as a defensive back because there's going to be a lot of pressure on the opposing quarterback, and sometimes he has to get rid of the ball before he wants to. And having great footwork and being in great position like Harris has been during that decade, Charlton, has gotten him a nod on this team.
Big C, I know we're doing last decade, but who does it remind you, going back into the day when you saw players, and sometimes we see that same version of a player oftentimes 20 or 30 years later. Anyone comes to mind from the past when you're thinking about Chris Harris, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Harris and what he's playing now, Charlton, against the slot receivers, and that's more of a new hybrid position, in the NFL. You're going to look at like a Ken Riley who played with the Cincinnati Bengals, Charlton. He reminds me a lot of him physically.
Yeah, that's very good knowledge, Big C, and still seeing these guys bringing it really important. You got to have a strong safety. The guy has to have no fear because he's a safety net between the end zone and the receiver that he's covering. Cam Chancellor, nobody does it better. He was a thumper, and a darn shame that he never earned a first-team All-Pro selection and was forced to retire after the age of 29, a two-time Super Bowl champion, a guy that was physically imposing. And give me your thought. I mean, it's a shame players get hurt, of course, but give me your thoughts on how much greater he could have been, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, Charlton, this was a guy who had to take the long route to get to the NFL, a la Warren Moon. He had to come via Canada prior to making it in the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks. But when he became a member of the Seahawks, Charlton, he was one of the most dominating, imposing secondary men in the NFL. Everybody remembers his hits against the Denver Broncos in that Super Bowl, Charlton, when the Seattle got their first Super Bowl victory.
Right.
But a lot of people don't remember what he did in his second Super Bowl win when he was with the New England Patriots. Everybody wanted to blame Russell Wilson for throwing that interception and being picked off by Butler in the end zone, but it was Cam Chancellor who made the call in the secondary to let Jimmy Butler know what was coming his direction. And if you see right behind him, you'll see Cam Chancellor pointing and hollering that the ball was coming right here. Butler jumped the route, and New England picked up the Super Bowl win.
Going back in the day, I'm thinking Mel Blount, Big C. Give me your thoughts on who reminds you of this young talent that could have played another 5 years. Who in the past reminds you of how great this guy was, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, when I think about Cam Chancellor, I'm going to throw a hat at Mike Davis, who played strong safety for the Oakland Raiders, wore number 36. When they were winning Super Bowls, Charlton, with Jim Plunkett at quarterback. A lot of the same physical characteristics.
Yeah, I second that, Big C. When you go into free safety, it's free because if you're not the safety net, you're going to be given touchdowns. That means you'll be sitting on the sidelines. I want to get your thoughts. Earl Thomas, nobody was better than him during his prime. He's still playing at a high level. It's honestly a little surprising. He was named first team All-Pro only 3 times. Here's a guy, just like we talked about Adrian Peterson and Frank Gore. This guy has been broken up, and they put him back together again like Humpty Dumpty, Big C, and still has a chance to play in another Super Bowl. Give me your thoughts on the great Earl Thomas, Big C, your thoughts.
Earl Thomas, since coming out of the University of Texas, Charlton, has been a perennial All-Pro. He was a quarterback of that Seattle defense during that decade, just a dominant player. Unfortunately, his career ended in a knee injury, and he left via free agency, and he ended up in Baltimore. He left one great defense, Charlton, and ended up on another. He's a very savvy player, always been keen to the success of the teams that he's been on. And if you look at it, Seattle got better defensively as well as Baltimore's got better defensively with Earl Thomas covering the secondary.
Anybody from your past that reminds you, not big in stature, not like a Steve Atwater, not like an Earl Blount, but someone that was just always there. As small as he was in size, he can also lay the boom, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, if you go back and you look at a Donnie Shell with the Pittsburgh Steelers during that Super Bowl run of the Steel Curtain defense, a lot similar physically, a guy who always had a nose for the ball and was fearless.
Yeah, fearless. I really like those. The same comparison, Big C. When you need a kicker, a guy that can come on and kick the football, and sometimes the kicker's the most difficult job in the world because you're blamed for what happens if you don't make it. No one blames the quarterbacks or the receivers or the linemen when they miss a block or throw a bad pass. A kicker, you need someone to kick the ball that can get you into a Super Bowl sometimes. I think the Minnesota Vikings suffered that back in the day when the Falcons beat them up in Minnesota. But kicker, Justin Tucker, the most accurate kicker in NFL history. Give me your thoughts on this guy, and he might be kicking again down there in Florida at the end of the season. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you think about Justin Tucker and the pressure that are on kickers in the NFL, we see kickers getting cut for missing a couple of field goals in a game. When you're the most accurate kicker in the NFL history, that stands alone by itself. That means that nobody has ever been better than you, and Justin Tucker has proven that.
Yeah, we think about wide right. I think about Sebastian Janikowski that came out of Florida State. He was Al Davis's first and last #1 draft pick, and just going back over the time, we hear about Dempsey's kicking 64 yards. Anyone that this gentleman reminds you of, Big C, your thoughts?
And I'm going to think about the last superstar straightaway kicker in NFL history, and the only kicker to ever win Most Valuable Player in the NFL, and that was Mark Mosley of the Washington Redskins.
Yeah, there's so many great players back in the day. Sometimes you need a guy like a Ray Guy on your team for the Oakland Raiders from back in the day, someone that can punt the ball and give you some distance when you can't get the first down. Punter. Today's guy, over the last day, Johnny Hekker, averages 47 yards per punt, has went 13 of 22, and one touchdown pass actually in his first 13 downs as a passer, Big C. So oftentimes punters have a lot of talent. Oftentimes they're players that decide where the defense is going to start up on the field. They determine field position. They flip the field. Give me your thoughts on the great Johnny Hekker, Big C.
Johnny Hekker reminds me of another kicker, Charlton, who was and when you look at Hecker's career, he is the third-string quarterback for the L.A. Rams.
Yeah. Just
like Ray Guy was the third-string quarterback for the Oakland Raiders. Both of those gentlemen played quarterback when they were in college, as a backup. Hekker, he's thrown 13 first down passes from the punt position, Charlton, that has helped the L.A. Rams since they've been there throughout his career. So when you think about a dual, triple threat, and he's a big man, he stands 6'4" and weighs about 230, so he's not afraid of running the football, but he's a pure passer when he has to throw, and those 13 first downs on fourth down proves it.
Anyone in the past, as you go back and you look at the days that people forget about because we didn't have maybe Sports Center around, who does he remind you of that was great in the past, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, and like I said earlier, Ray Guy. Ray Guy was the third-string quarterback for the Oakland, Los Angeles Raiders during that time, and Hekker has done the same thing for the Los Angeles Rams.
So many great football players, and that's Big C's thoughts on the top players through the all-decade from 2010 to 2019. There'll be more players that will also make some noise coming up in the next 10 years. You can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Speaker.com. The apps that I love are called Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You will hear from our sponsors. You will hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, also Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. So much happening in the world of sports. I just want to close out, Big C. Today is a beautiful Thursday. It feels like the weekend already because we had New Year's. Thursday night basketball, NBA style. Charlotte at Cleveland, Denver at Indiana. We have Toronto, the defending world champion, Toronto Raptors at the Miami Heat, Golden State Warriors at Minnesota, Utah at Chicago, Brooklyn at Dallas, Oklahoma City at San Antonio, Memphis at the Sacramento Kings, and Detroit at the LA Clippers. Big C, I know we're still heavy into football season. Anything in the NBA right now excite you outside of LeBron James? Is he declining or is he still the same, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, no, LeBron is not declining. You think about it, he turned 35 years old just a couple of days ago, Charlton. He's still performing at an all-star level. He's been besieged by another groin injury once again, but at 35, I guess your body breaks down a little bit. But you have to press hard to find somebody when he wants to take over a game that's more dominant than LeBron James.
Yeah, and everybody has comparisons because we see every play, every dribble, and every time people have a miscap, then obviously it makes a lot of news. And again, the world lost, Sam Weiss and then also David Stern the last couple of days, both 77 years old. I guess as we hear, it's not how long you live, it's how you live. And those men live pretty good lives. Big C, any more thoughts?
Well, Charlton, I mean, they've both been synonymous with, greats that has happened in their professional sports. You think about David Stern. When he took over the NBA, it only consisted of 23 teams.
Yeah.
At the end of his tenure as commissioner, it was up to 30 teams, Charlton. The expansion that he created as far as the NBA, not just making it a U.S. game, but Charlton making it a global game, extending into Asia and Europe, Charlton. Yeah. But even more so, his most significant thing that he ever did as a commissioner, and many people don't realize this, was when he convinced the NBA to play in the 1992 Olympics.
Yeah.
He said, guys, I need you to establish dominance in the world again of the NBA. And the advancement that he made for African-American athletes in the NBA, Charlton, making them the face of the NBA, is that this is how we're going to make the game global. This is how we're going to make the game important. He took the forefront and had to see that, Charlton, that African-Americans needed to be the segue of the NBA into society. And what he did to the world when he challenged the world, said, we're going to come in and give you our best.
Yeah.
And he did that in the 1992 Olympics with the Dream Team. And they went out and set an Olympic record as far as scoring margin, Charlton, and dominated the world to show that American basketball still had world supremacy.
Big C very well said that again, you see African Americans leading the forefront in this billion-dollar industry. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, Charlton, as I sit back and look at it as how we've rolled into 2020, it makes me think of a Bill Murray movie called Groundhog Day and Andy McDowell. I've been living the same day over and over, Charlton. Every day I turn on the TV, there's another bowl game.
There's another bowl game. There's also more libations, and hopefully there's more Big C Sports. You can always follow every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.